streamed, so if anybody wants to watch it whenever, it's going to be on the website for Mountain View. Send everybody the link for it. Okay. Of course, due to COVID, it's extremely limited, so we're going to have to do this ourselves. So I'll speak. I know Matthew would like to say some words. Anybody who wants to come up and share their memories, experiences with Dad, please do so. This day is to honor him. To share our memories, our sorrows, and most of all, to celebrate his life. He was a husband, father, grandfather, or G-Pop. Dad had a way of touching everybody. He had his own unique way of touching those that he was close to and he loved. He loved his family, his children very, very much. His grandchildren. And of course, my mother. Albert Vale Groschel Jr. He was born September 6th, 1932 in Manhattan, in the city of New York, to Albert Vale Groschel Sr. and Laura Lee Sabin. He had a brother, Jeffrey, who passed at a very young age, and this affected Dad profoundly for the rest of his life. We would have conversations of that, especially after Mom passed. We talked about a lot of things. In 1950, Dad attended Kenyon College in Ohio and received his degree in biology in 1954. He served in the United States Army from July 6, 1955, to when he was honorably discharged March 2nd, 1962. Later on, Dad moved from New York to Los Angeles, California, where he met and fell in love with our mother, Charlene Joan Brown, to whom he married June 2nd, 1967, and remained lovingly married for nearly 50 years until Mom's passing, April of 2016. Dad was a loyal employee of the Los Angeles Traffic Department from 1966 until his retirement in 2007, often bragging that the city was losing hundreds, if not thousands of thousands of dollars since his retirement due to the speed zones not being renewed. He was very proud of that. After Mom passed, Dad and I grew closer than we ever had been. We talked a lot about Mom and a lot of things. And things I didn't understand, I came to understand after talking about these things. We struggled at times with our relationship as father and son. I apologize. But there is no doubt that we loved and respected each other. I'm truly honored to be a son. After Mom passed, Dad would spend every other weekend with us when we lived in Agora Hills. This is when the relationship between all of us grew on many levels. I remember him going with walks with Matthew all the time to Chumash Park on every visit, and they would play catch. They would walk by the stream there near the Bat Cave, things like that. He loved listening to Chris play his guitar. Say, Chris, you join a band, started coming around. He used to play rock and roll with Chris and everything, but loved listening to Chris play the guitar. I saw the relationship between him and Yanni develop. There were talks of New York and his parents. He told Yanni things I never knew. And the reason for that is because I never asked the questions. I never asked questions in turn. That's the main reason why I really did. I think the relationship between them grew into what can only be described as a special father and daughter type relationship. The other day I was going through Dad's room, through his collection of books and other items. I remember him sharing with me the books he'd bought at the Altadena Library. Many were on sale, pretty much all of them were on sale for a few dollars. To say the least, this shocked Dad because he was happy he got the great deal, however saddened that it proved that no one read books anymore. This really bothered Dad, considering he was an avid reader. I think anybody who knew Dad knew that he was. Sometimes he'd read 2 or 3 books at a time, which is strange, but he did. As I was going through Dad's things, I I could almost hear his voice when I came across a certain book or item that was special to him. It was as if it's as if part of him was imprinted on the item of the book. At times I caught myself literally responding to him as if he were there, considering, countering in some way, agreeing, disagreeing, or laughing. There was one book that I came across, The Prophet, that put everything into perspective for me. A book in which I'll elaborate on more in closing. I came upon letters. Jean Pugash wrote Dad, letters we'd hope upon Dad's return he would read through again. Dad and Jean met in Kenyon College in 1950. Though as time went on, they didn't communicate on a regular basis, they still remained friends ever since. They would call each other once in a while, and from time to time, talk and laugh. But as both got married and life went on, they kind of lost touch with each other for long periods of time. When Dad was in the hospital, I managed to keep in regular contact with Jean, and would read Dad letters Jean would send him. Dad would sit quietly and listen as I read them over the phone. After reading the letters, I could hear Dad on the other end of the line. I'd ask if he heard what I read. He would respond with a tender yes. His spirits would spike up after that. Sometimes that he would talk for a short period of time like he always talked. He would even reference some of the letters that Jean had wrote, parts of them. The letters were touching and gave perspective on Dad's life well before he became Dad or Grandpa. In these letters, Jean reminisced many occasions, the times they shared at Jackson Heights in New York, and the visits to Boston, the wonderful trips they took to Jones Beach and to Kenyon College when our grandfather and grandmother drove them there for the academic year. Our grandfather would often pick them up from Kenyon and travel to Cleveland, where they spent weekends before driving back to New York. There was also a trip to Los Angeles in 1966, when they spent Christmas week with Grandma and Rodney. This was a special visit, remember. It was interesting to know that Dad and Jean would hang out in Dad's apartment, number 3421, in Jackson Heights, and smoke Turkish cigarettes in the company of Dad's giant poodle, Kiki. There were meetings in the Fisk building where Dad worked for Sadler and Hennessy, dropping off drawings of the famous artists who worked with the Deere Corporation. The artist's name was never mentioned, but it brings to light the love and passion Dad had for art. Dad was, in fact, a very gifted artist in his own right, a wonderful talent. He would do sketch art and landscapes. He often sketched out comedic cartoons for the local newspapers. I didn't know this until I had these discussions with him, and he showed me them. They were really great, many of which he admitted were never submitted, due in part to Dad being his own worst critic. So many talented artists. Dad only saw the flaws in his work, flaws only his eyes were acute to, flaws none of us ever saw. There was a famous German restaurant on First Avenue underneath the railroad tracks, where Dad and Jean would meet and browse the menu and order German food. Dad liked German food. This brought to mind the time Yanni and I took him to the Der Wolf on Fair Oaks Boulevard in Pasadena to have a beer. Funny because Dad looked over the menu and knew exactly what to order. We had a great time eating the pickles and pretzels dipped in the assorted mustards, all of which Dad was familiar. It was a very special time. It was great to see Dad laugh and tell stories that we'd never heard before. All of this gives a glimpse of our father, grandfather, as a spirited young man whose whole life was well ahead of him. Jean described Dad as, quote, a very exceptional person, my oldest and dearest friend. Everyone who knew Dad can attest to that. Not too long ago, we went on a trip to the Grand Canyon, Hoover Dam, and Calico Ghost Town. Dad really liked the Hoover Dam, but it was damn hot. I remember him looking over the dam and its magnificent construction and say, quote, it's damn hot, I'll be over by the giant fans. Soon all of us were standing there trying to keep our cell phones from overheating. I remember all of us laughing. I remember Dad's laughing. The Grand Canyon was exciting. We watched an eagle glide silently over the canyon. Moments like this become memorable later on. At the time, it was simply just an eagle soaring and flying. Thinking of it now became something so much more special. All of us were excited to show Grandpa the Grand Canyon. To Dad, it was just a big hole in the ground, but he admitted it certainly was amazing. I'll miss our trips to the eye doctor. There was a long corridor we'd walk down on the way to the office. He'd always mimic the opening to the Twilight Zone as we foot slog our way to the waiting room. He always wanted to go for fish tacos afterwards. He would order 3, I would order 2. He would eat 2 of his and without exception offer me the 3rd one. I didn't think much of it at the time. But now I think about it every day. Dad always reminisced the days of his youth. I now understand why. It retained his spirit, and I only wish I'd listened more closely to him. Because youth is a time when our dreams burn the brightest. They are one of the few gifts we are allowed to carry on with us from this life. The path ahead is only wide open for him now. His journey, his peace, and his dreams. Going through Dad's room, as I mentioned, I came across the prophet. The paper cover was aged and discolored. It was the very book Mom loaned me back in the late 80s. I opened it and realized Dad had given it to Mom in 1984 as a gift on our birthday, writing, quote, "To Charlene with love, for all our days together, Al," unquote. It explains why she insisted I return to the book promptly. I opened the prophet and began reading. I came to the chapter on marriage and read over a verse that I'd no doubt read many times, but for whatever reason, never carried the weight as it did when I read it at that moment, at that time. I'll close today with a verse in tribute to Mom and Dad and this book being in some way a boundless connection between them. Quote, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together, even in the silent memory of God." Unquote. I love you, Dad. Rest in peace. You will always be cherished and missed. Okay. Thank you all for being here. Grandpa was a great man. To many of us, he showed us true strength and what it meant to be fulfilled. One of the greatest memories I have with Grandpa is when he would make the choice to call us while we were living in Agoura Hills. He would come over and bring his 2 best friends along with him. Whenever he'd arrive, we'd welcome him with love and open arms. I remember going on walks with him. He was always so talkative with me. I learned a great deal about who he was as a person. We'd sometimes walk to the park right across our condo. We'd always talk about how his life was and how he felt about it while we played catch. Soon after, we'd go home and watch his favorite TV show. Usually, his favorite TV channel was TMC, a movie channel which played films from the 50s and the 60s. He knew every movie title, who was in it, and how he felt about it. Later, as time grew, I soon learned that this was his comfort. Months later, Grandpa would wake up in the morning and always sing his morning jingle on his way to the kitchen to pour himself a cup of coffee. After, he'd go to the living room,
sit down on his chair, turn on the Weather Channel, and then he'd make 3 groans as he sipped on his coffee. It'd go like, ah, ooh, ah. Eating dinner with Grandpa was exciting, but I truly think he enjoyed us being with him. I remember our discussion about horseradish. I asked Grandpa why he'd think they'd call it horseradish, and his reply was silly. He made us laugh. He said that maybe there was a horse that really liked radishes. Such a simple joke. It's exactly what Grandpa was, a simple man. He grew up in an era where saying things like, I love you, was often rare and unheard of. Therefore, when he managed to say, I love you to me, I knew he meant it. I cook for him sometimes. Though I'm no 5-star cook, he treated me like one. In the food I'd make for him with love and care, he'd always tell me that he thinks I'm a fine cook and I should continue. His personality was so bright. He always had patience and lived life in the slow lane, not because he had to, no. He did it because he needed to enjoy the time before it slips away. He really enjoyed our trip to the Grand Canyon. We showed him the Hoover Dam, even in record-breaking heat. We managed to show him just how magnificent the world is, despite him talking about how small it is. He had a great character. I remember being in the hotel, going down to the pool. As I looked around, I saw Grandpa coming to the pool looking for us. I swam over to him and I asked him, how did you get down here, Grandpa? And his reply was amazing. He showed me that he had heart. He told me that he had come down from the room using the stairs. Stairs, I replied. That's like 6 flight of stairs, as I thought to myself. It dawned on me at that moment. He came down not for the pool, but he came down to be with us. He shared with me that day that he had heart. Lastly, I remember sitting on the couch while he was in his rocking chair. We were watching some TMC movie, and during a boring part, he stood up, walked to the freezer in the kitchen. He grabbed 2 fudgesicles. He then walked over, gave me that fudgesicle before sitting down on the couch next to me and continuing to watch the movie. He had respect and love for me, as I did him. Grandpa was an honorable man, a man that was and forever will be valued in our hearts. For his soul has left his vessel, but his soul has joined the universe and the divine. For when we leave this very room, our wishes, hopes, and prayers for his safety may be accepted and shown in heaven for him to see. I love you, Grandpa, always and forever. Thank you.
Reflecting on what you just said, Matthew, some of the conversations that are most memorable to me with Dad are philosophical and about the spirit and soul, and how just because the body ends, the spirit doesn't. So this poem that I came across kind of resonates with me as far as how Dad really viewed that. It's called His Journey's Just Begun. Don't think of him as gone away. His journey's just begun. Life holds so many facets. This earth is only one. Just think of him as resting from the sorrows and the tears in a place of warmth and comfort or their own in days and years. Think how he must be wishing that we could know today how nothing but our sadness can really pass away. And think of him as living in the hearts of those he touched, for nothing loved is ever lost as he was loved so much. Thank you to everyone for letting me out.
So, just really wanted to say something. I know I didn't get to know you for too long, but I'm so grateful for the times I did get to speak. Oh my God. You know, something that I'm very grateful for, that I remember very distinctly feeling from the first times I came to Gaz's life is he really showed me how family takes care of family. I mean, it's such a blessing to see how strong you guys are and to have taken care of him. It is a great example for me, and I have grown so much from the conversations that we've shared. I felt every conversation with him, I learned so much, and I never wanted them to end. I just wanted to absorb all of the information in life that he lived and take it with me throughout my life. And I'm just thankful he started. It's so beautiful. I cherish the moments we shared, and I just want to say that. And I'm also thankful that I always called him Grandpa because I just felt like he was my grandpa now too. So, I love you, Grandpa. I love you guys.
Okay, does anybody else have anything you want to share? I guess, short service. As I said, streaming is available, you can watch it anytime. So, next we can just remain here and spend some quiet moments with the Pops. I want to also thank everybody who sent the flowers. Incredible. It just shows what an effect he had on everybody that knew him. So he was dearly loved, and he'll be fine. So, thanks. Yeah, I was gonna say, awkward silence.